Hello, beautiful people. It is Wednesday, the 30th of April, 2025. It is exactly 5 p.m. GMT. Welcome to Wake Up Later with Sonia Poulton and guest episode 107. Thank you so much for being here. I see you're already very busy in the comments and I truly appreciate it. Yes, I do indeed. And hello, Queen B3 UK. She says, day one here. Indeed. One here. Welcome, welcome. I'm sure you'll be made very welcome indeed. And welcome to Wake Up Later, the show that knows the best way for the powers that be to draw attention to any cause is to seek to censor it. Have they not heard of the Streisand effect? Because we have, and we'll be talking about it. So what is on Wake Up Later this evening? Well, first of all, hello to viewers on YouTube, Rumble, X, and we're also available on Spotify when the stream ends. I truly appreciate you all being here, including our wonderful mods. On today's or this evening's Wake Up, rather, we will be joined by wonderful truth warrior David Whitehead from Canada. He's going to be here to talk about Mark Carney, about 2030, about New World Order and more, and especially about the cults that run the world. Special request from our drumstick. I don't know if drumstick has arrived in the comments yet, but that is your request, sorted drumstick. And we'll also be looking at the headlines, including outages and prepping, plus Trump reprimands Jeff Bezos, which is fabulous. I kind of liked it, but I also like the fact that Jeff Bezos, however you want to pronounce his name, they had that little backwards and forwards, and we could clearly see who holds the power in that relationship. Plus Kneecap, Irish band, Streisand effect, 100%. I want to talk about that. And Virginia Giuffre, very, very mixed responses to the announcement of her death last week. Plus fake Madeline PR quits. That's interesting. I want to look at that a little bit more. And just to say, the bird feeder competition winner, thank you, all of you, for entering. Very much appreciated. Lovely to read some of those messages, by the way. The winner is Dennis Kearney of Ireland. And Dennis, I promise I will get that posted before the end of this week. It's just the post office is a little way from here, but I promise I will get that sorted. I have packaged it. I have done that. And I will send the link to my sister-in-law's work for any of those who've asked. And thank you for your kind words to those who've already purchased stuff from my sister-in-law's site on Etsy. Thank you so much. Truly appreciated. How are you all, beautiful people? How are you all? And I see Fred is in the comments and our crazy bunny, our mod. And who else? Oh, they're having a conversation there. And M and Colin. Hello, Colin. How are you? And Marco, you. And Drumstick. There you go. I mentioned you earlier, and Stephen Hall, and thank you all for being here. And hello, Craig Campbell. Craig Campbell will be joining us on Monday from Praia da Luz, which is, of course, is the little Portuguese village where Madeleine McCann was reported missing from. And this Friday will be I believe the 18th anniversary. I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. And that's what I love and appreciate about you all. So tonight on Channel 4, Groomed, a national scandal. And this is Maggie Oliver's involved. Jane Senior is involved. A number of brilliant people who I have interviewed are involved. And it's basically the idea is that Anna Hall, who has been reporting on gang grooming for more than 2 decades, and she actually did a groundbreaking film in 2004 called Edge of the City. And but now this is like a progression, and obviously now we've had it all kind of like blow up again and everything. So I think that'll be really good. I've no idea what it will be like, but from all accounts, the people involved, it should be brilliant. Frankly, it should absolutely be brilliant. And hello, Teresa and Randy and Marcuson. How are you all? Tomorrow, May the 1st, is local elections and a by-election in the UK. The by-election has been triggered by the conviction of Labour MP Mike Amesbury, who received a suspended prison sentence for repeatedly punching a man. Thank goodness he didn't write a social media post, eh? And according to a new poll, the most popular political leader is none of the above. And that's literally just hours before voters go to polls in the local election. We've all had enough, haven't we? Haven't we all had enough? And many believe that Reform UK is on the cusp of a major breakthrough in these local elections. And that follows, of course, deep disillusionment with the main leading parties. They're suggesting that Reform could actually scoop up to 500 council seats to make Nigel Farage the biggest winner of the local elections. We shall see. We shall see. We'll be looking at the results on Friday and discussing what it may potentially mean. I'm not a big one for actual politics around here as such. Obviously, the whole world is political in the same way as it is psychological. So we do cover those things. But in terms of things like local election, it doesn't really thrill me too much, because really, what is actually going to change? Not a great deal. But I know there are some people who would disagree with me, and that's fine, because that's what we do around here. We're allowed to disagree. Isn't that great? And Barclays Bank, actually one of my banks, has confirmed that men who identify as women will now be barred from using the ladies' toilets. The group chief executive, who is frequently known as Venkat, that is the nickname they use for him. It's CS Venkatarishnan. You can see why they call him Venkat, right? Has said that the group would not allow men who identify as women to use female lavatories to ensure it complies with the law. Now, that's quite major, because let me tell you, Barclays was really big on the whole captured by Stonewall LGBTQ into infinity number. Absolutely, they were. It was all over the place. And when you would log on to the app, you would be presented with a man dressed as a woman. I found it absolutely insulting, as did many people. So that's quite interesting turnaround. Whatever does that mean? And headlines this week. Well, what on earth was happening in Spain and Portugal this week, and further afield, actually? Let me just, I think you can still see those pictures, even though I slightly reduced them. Power outages, of course, in Spain and Portugal on Monday left millions in darkness as blackouts shut off phone services, traffic lights, stopped trains and cut off water access. Hospitals and other emergency services switched to generators. Gas stations stopped working completely. The outage also briefly impacted France. There were reports of an internet disruption in Morocco. The causes of the outages remain under investigation. That wonderful description. But Portuguese energy officials have denied reports that it was tied to a, in quotes, atmospheric phenomenon. What could that mean, kids? What could atmospheric phenomenon possibly mean? So I take from that, whatever that means, it probably is actually tied to an atmospheric phenomenon. Actually, no. Last week, Spain famously hit its first weekday of 100% renewable power on its national grid. And then lights out, with Spanish authorities forced to admit that widespread solar power could be to blame for national blackouts. We've been saying it. We know it. It's a crock. It's a hoax. Very sad that there are a number of deaths to result from the outages in Spain. Spanish police are investigating the deaths of 3 people in a town of Tabodila. Never actually heard of that town, but maybe you have. And a spokeswoman said the bodies of a couple and their son were found inside their home on Tuesday morning. It is possible that the carbon monoxide alarm may have failed. That is what they're speculating at this stage. And a woman also died during the blackout from a fire that was caused by a candle in her flat in Madrid. Don't let that put you off prepping, people. And because I think it's really important to say, first of all, it would appear that the net zero dream is having something of a hard time as it becomes increasingly apparent that it will create problems, not resolve anything. Absolutely not resolve anything. We see that. We can see that. And can somebody tell me why Tony Blair, master of dark arts, quote unquote, don't want any more lawsuits, is now saying that the current net zero policies are doomed to fail? That's totally up his globalist alley. Why is he suddenly saying that? Anybody want to enlighten me in the comments? I don't like it when they throw us those little curveballs, because you know that it means something. I just don't know what it means. Why prep? We live on an island surrounded by seafood. What if you don't eat seafood though, Markson? What? Right. And the thing is, here's what I want to say. There is a suggestion, of course, we've seen it, that this will spread to other parts of the world, including the UK. Many are predicting power cuts. Some do that because there is profit in fear. The Alex Jones of this world, they literally would not exist unless they had spent the last decade plus scaring the crap out of people. There is profit in fear. That is what they do. And I just want to say this, and I can't stress this enough. Do not fear. Just be prepared. Always be prepared. There's nothing wrong in being prepared, right? I cannot stress the importance of being prepared. This is not to scare anyone. Basic prep for any eventuality. It's always good to have some things in store if you can. And by that, I include water, absolutely water, food that is not quick to perish, canned goods, candles, torches, and if you're able, cash and gold, that sort of stuff. That's what I'm talking about. Before I bring in our first guest, although he's already here, so I might actually, no, I tell you what, I'm just going to quickly tackle this story and then I will bring in our first guest. And I think it's interesting. This is the very mixed responses to the death of Virginia Giuffre. And of course, horrible circumstances. The fallout of the death at her farm in Australia continues, with some people believing she was taken out, others believing that she ended her own life, and even some doubting that she has died at all. But taking it that she has passed away, there is a significant backlash to the notion that Victoria was a fierce warrior who supported victims. Newspaper articles in major press, including the Daily Mail, are now popping up, no longer afraid of Virginia's financial ability to sue them. And one of the people who has been extensively quoted is Molly Skye Brown. I know Molly. I interviewed Molly 3 years ago. She was Maxwell attempted to pick up Molly. Molly worked in the same area that all these people were. Glenn Maxwell attempted to pick up Molly. Molly refused. Molly's a survivor of child abuse. She had some interesting intel to share with Virginia, but Virginia didn't want to know because, as I've told people before, it was a gatekeeping operation. And the females who were put forward to do with Epstein were, in my opinion, and we are still allowed to have that firmly held belief, as they say in defamation courts. My firmly held belief is that it was a gatekeeper operation in order not to be able to tackle what was really going on at Epstein's properties. And Molly Skye Brown is of exactly the same understanding. I'm going to read you in part what Molly has written on her Instagram and was quoted in the Daily Mail. She said, "The other side of Virginia Giuffre is finally being revealed. Despite her public image as a survivor and advocate, those of us who were harmed by her silence and her actions have waited years for the truth to surface. Virginia was a recruiter, not just by rumor, it's on the record, and yet she faced no real accountability." And Molly goes on to talk about how she reached out to Virginia years ago, and because she believed that Virginia was very brave and was there for survivors. And she said that her illusions were very quickly shattered. But DM, the Daily Mail in particular, have really gone in on Virginia this week. They're talking about how in 2007 she did not want to be bothered about the Epstein stuff, and those of us who know the story and have researched it know this to be true. Absolutely, she didn't. And actually what happened was federal prosecutors who were looking to prosecute Epstein had approached her, and they let it be known to her that there would be some compensation, that she would be able to apply for compensation. And she ended up settling with Epstein to the tune of $500,000. And she's done that all the way down the line. She settled. Now, I don't want to speak bad about the dead. That's not what this is about. But I'm a truth seeker. I believe in the truth. And I was clear on Monday that I do not believe that Virginia was taken out. But I also want to be clear. I understand why some people may think that. I get it. What I don't get is online influencers spreading lies for the sake of money. It's immoral. And I'm talking about people like Russell Brand, who claimed that her chilling last post said she was not suicidal. He's such a BS merchant. That post he's referring to was from 2019. If anybody understands anything about depression, you can change from one moment to the next. So a post from 2019 where she says she's in no way, shape or form suicidal is not evidence that she didn't take her own life. So he is an absolute BS merchant and I loathe him. I believe that this is due to the very significant personal problems that she was experiencing. Obviously, there was the whole issue about how she posted that image of her being appear to be beaten and bruised. And she said she only had 4 days. She was 4 days from death. That wasn't true. Her 2 brothers have recently been staying with her. They flew from America to Australia to stay with her. And they were in her farmhouse when she was said to have taken her life. Today, her family have released a note. Let me just show you this. They've released a note which they found, and they believe that Virginia had written this to coincide with a rally today opposite the White House ahead of Denim Day. And the note says, mothers, fathers, sisters and brothers need to show the battle lines are drawn and we stand together to fight for the future of victims. Is protesting the answer? I don't know, but we've got to start somewhere. I don't necessarily think Virginia is either an angel or a devil. I think she was just a human being who had a lot of problems and she was dealing with a lot of things. I am sure there is much more that is going to come out about this as time progresses. But yeah, just to absolutely say, I get it why people think something really weird happened. I absolutely do. Her old barrister, been all over Piers Morgan, saying need to hold the Duke to account and everything. Her old barrister is just an opportunist, as indeed appears to be her new barrister, who doesn't seem to be much better. So a lot of opportunism all around this, as is always the way. I want to welcome in my first guest because, well, he's just a refreshing voice. And let's bring him in. Here he is, David Whitehead, truth warrior. How are you, David?
Sonia, it's been a while. Good to see you again. So glad to be back. We're doing as well as we can here. I'm living right now in British Columbia, Canada. Lots going on. But other than that, things are great. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing really, really well. I'm so delighted you're with us today. And as you say, we spoke, I think probably the last time was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, but you were one of the people who was absolutely at the forefront of what was going on with C19. You've been completely unafraid to call it out. And I love that about you. You've written and you've extensively made films to do with cults around the world, which I want to get onto. But first of all, I want to tackle your thoughts on Mark Carney. Mark Carney, of course, has now become the new Prime Minister of Canada. Mark Carney was the former governor of the Bank of England, a WEFer, a globalist. Tell us, what are your thoughts about Mark Carney?
Yeah, this is a frightening turn of events, but nothing that I wasn't already sort of deep down expecting, sad to say. But yeah, he's as globalist as you can get. He's basically running on the platform of the Club of Rome policy. And, he's a chair of Brookfield Asset Management, governor of Bank of England, like you mentioned. He's also the president of Chatham House. I'm not sure how familiar maybe your listeners are with that. That was the Royal Institute of International Affairs. The late, great Dr. John Coleman wrote an entire book exposing that, talking about the Committee of 300 and the globalist connections and whatnot. So he's up there with all these people. There's also some interesting photographs of him with the likes of Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein and all of that. So it makes you wonder. But before going down the rabbit hole too much, I'm more concerned about his policies, the way he was sort of just brought in out of nowhere. Most Canadians had no idea who this guy was. He's got 3 passports and suddenly he's the biggest Canadian ever. He's sitting there with Mike Myers in a hockey rink. Can you believe it? Talking about how Canadian he is and how much he suddenly cares about this country in the wake of Trudeau, which was an absolute disaster. And so the fact that Canadians decided to vote, although it was a close margin at the end, but a little too close, they decided to vote for basically more of the same that they've had over the last decade is absolutely insane to me. I think I know why it happened, but nonetheless, Canada is not going to be in a good position, I think, over the next little bit. But there may be a few lights at the end of the tunnel that we can discuss as we go.
Well, I like the sound of that. And it's really interesting because my neighbor, who was not particularly awake, quote unquote, and turned around to me and actually described Mark Carney and Canada as someone who was selected, not elected. And I was completely gobsmacked. That was not the language my neighbor would normally come out with. I think people are waking up like with a speed that I've not seen in my lifetime. Is that your experience?
Yeah, it is. And maybe that's what it takes. Maybe it's like what we've discussed during the lockdowns and everything, that you try to tell people the facts, you try to show them the truth, you try to say, hey, look, just look at these facts. You don't have to just believe what I'm saying. Just look at this. And they refuse to do it. But then they experience the effects of those policies. Well, it's going to be the same here in Canada with Carney and the continuation of this liberal regime, which is really representing a lot of foreign interests and globalist interests, etc. So we have to sort of go through the hard times in order to finally wake up. I'm sure it's the same in UK. It's the same in all over the world right now, where you sort of have to, I guess people have to go through these challenging times that are ahead of us in order to wake up to see what went wrong, what we can do to fix it, So sadly, that's just the way of it.
I think it's been my experience, certainly over the last 5 years, that along with the UK and the US, Canada has been right up there with its kind of 2030 agenda. It's pushed all manner of genders, the queer agenda. Obviously, there was the whole issue with the Canadian truckers, the freezing of bank accounts. I mean, for a small country, small, quote unquote, you get my point though, right?
Yeah,
A
yeah.
lot has been going on there, a lot. It feels that it's at the center of something. What do you think about that?
Well, it's definitely felt like that. It feels, I've spoken to friends who live in Australia, which is basically just another vassal state of the Crown Corporation, just like Canada is. And it seems like we're a testing ground of some sort where our population is very highly propagandized. There's people that argue that the Canadian population is one of the most propagandized populations in the West right now. Although I'll bet you'd say, maybe in the UK it's worse. I don't know. Either way, it seems like there's a machine of propaganda that's hitting all of these Western countries, and it's been going on for some time. You've been covering this, and it seems that there's a multi-pronged attack going on across the West, and the attack is against the foundations of Western civilization. And I think that's what we saw during COVID. That's what we're seeing with all of these various things, the latest things, whether we're talking climate, whether we're talking the issue you brought up with the transing of kids and all the whole thing. These are all just disguised issues that really behind those issues is this agenda, the agenda to completely change the fabric of our society and move us towards what I think is the real agenda, which is to establish a world superstate, and basically to create a one ring of power to rule them all. That's been the dream for a long time. And they have to remove all the obstacles that would get in the way of that. And of course, having people living in these countries with, the foundational principles of liberty and freedom and free speech and, all these great values that we had to fight hard for to achieve, you've got to remove that. And how do you remove that? You can't just snap your fingers and get rid of it. You have to do this sort of long march to the institutions. You have to use the weapons of media warfare and narrative warfare in order to mold the public opinion and change what Bernays called the public mind. And I think the people that are behind a lot of this, they have our psychology dialed right in. And sadly, the average person out there has no idea about how any of this works. And that's why people such as yourself and the work that I'm doing and so many other great people are trying to bring people's attention to that so they can see the bigger picture. And I try to tell Canadians all the time, Canada is just one little branch in a bigger tree of what's going on. It's one little aspect of what's going on. We've got to zoom out and realize that this is a greater war that's happening around the world. And it's been going on for a long time. And Canada is a part of it. We feel like the center of the universe, but we're really not. But that's not to say that what's going on in Canada isn't important. And I think the rest of the world should pay attention to what's going on right now.
What do you think about Donald Trump? Because Donald Trump has now talked to Mark Carney, and Donald Trump says he still has his wish to make Canada the 51st state. How do you feel about that?
Well, that would be a whole other 2-hour podcast for us to dive in. But let me just say right away, I have a different opinion about Trump than most. I realized all the critiques, both from the mainstream or even people in the sort of alternative movement who have their concerns, their valid concerns. But I have a feeling there might be something going on behind the scenes when it comes to what's going on in America and with Trump that is not necessarily negative, but it's quite a tangled web you'd have to unpack. But I think that right now, a lot of people are blaming Trump for this loss in the election. And they're saying, well, because Trump started going with his tariffs and his 51st state rhetoric, which was really targeted at our politicians, who I think Trump would be aware of are essentially just working for these forces we've been talking about. They're blaming Trump for it. And I find it funny that Trump becomes the person that everybody wants to blame for everything. And in the end, I think we're all going to be getting a lesson on personal responsibility. But I think that there's something big coming for Canada. I have a sneaking intuitive feeling. I have no, real evidence of this other than Trump's track record of whenever he starts saying things that sound crazy, give it a minute because it usually pans out. I have a sneaking suspicion that maybe this deal about a 51st state or some form of alliance is already happening behind the scenes.
Right.
And that what's really going on here is a slow disclosure process to the Canadian public and the American public about how this is going to go down. But that's just my wild speculation. I think that if I look at what happened during COVID, I saw right away, and the Canadian people learned that our Charter of Rights, which is supposedly our constitution, didn't really hold any teeth when it came to challenging the courts in Canada to the grievances and the oversteps of government. And that means that we just got a crash course in learning that we didn't have the freedoms that we thought we did.
Oh,
we didn't have the protections that we thought we did. And so I look with a bit of envy at my American friends that they have a very robust constitution and Bill of Rights that is based on the premise that your rights are not granted or taken away by government. There's something inherent. There's something granted by nature or your creator. And whereas in Canada, we don't see it like that. We come from the old parliamentary British Admiralty system where rights are basically just privileges that can be taken away by the elites should they deem so. And we had a crash course on that during the lockdown. So in a way, I think that possibly because of the situation Canada's in, where we don't have our own military that's capable of defending us from threats like Russia or China or America or whatever, we don't really, we're in incredible debt. I think Trudeau and the Liberals were successful in their mission of gutting this country and turning it into the world's first post-national state. I think Carney is going to continue that. And I don't really see the political will in this country to do constitutional reform or actually address the issues that matter. So I'm kind of wondering if we're going to need some help from America in that regard to get us back on right track, and possibly we could work for some form of independence down the line. So I see 51st state as something that's happening, whether people are going to like it or not. And I'm not entirely against it. I got to be honest with you, Sonia.
I've got you. And the thing is, I want to go back to what you said earlier. And that was this whole idea that, we're all looking at this stuff. And this is the stuff that's happening right on a daily basis. But you're also about big pictures, about what is really taking place. And the series that you did, I love that series. You did a cult series. I think you started about 2018. And it was looking into, obviously, death and power and cults around the world. And I wanted to refresh my memory on it today and some of it. And I remember saying to you at the time, I think that this is groundbreaking, because not only was it produced in such a way that it competed with what was out there in legacy media, and that's often the problem that we suffer as independents, is that the quality and the standard of our production isn't often up there, but yours was. It absolutely was, and it still is, and it's fantastic. And your series, the thing is that that somebody's work is quality if you can go back 6 years later and it stood the test of time, and yours has. And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the public square. I want to talk about the power dynamics of these cults as well, and the rewriting of history. And we can start on any point you want on any of that. But if you would just kind of briefly give people an overview of why you decided to do that series in the first place.
Oh, it's very kind, Sonia. Thank you so much. And you were an amazing supporter of that series.
Good.
And I actually had featured the interview you did with me on it on my Cult of the Medics website. I believe it's still there as an introduction, so people go and check that out. But yeah, it's called Cult of the Medics. And what it was a research project that I had been doing for a long time, looking into the occult history, sort of the hidden history of the medical industrial complex. I had some personal experiences growing up, watching my own mother and friends and family members of mine go into the health system and they didn't come out alive. And I always wondered, what was really going on? Like, why are people getting sicker, not better? And so that kind of led me into, the basic entry level of, well, let's look into big pharma and let's look into these medicines and the vaccines and, all these things. And then you just, one thing leads to another, and you end up researching ancient occult orders that are having to do with these medical cults. And a lot of people don't even realize that the medical world is loaded with occult, ancient, mystical symbolism. And that's another fascination of mine. And I went, oh, what's up with that? Is it all just benign and maybe just some decoration or some throwback to the past? Or is there something a little more insidious behind it? And so what I tried to do in that series was just give an overall analysis of that research. We got into groups like the Club of Rome, the Knights of Malta, the Knights Hospitallers, right? Hint, hint. And we got into a lot of that. And then I overlaid that story on the canvas of what happened during the lockdown. So you'll see a lot of the relevant bits when I was producing those chapters of what was going on at that time during the lockdowns, because that's when I made the series. It was my therapeutic artistic release or expression during that time. And I still have a few chapters I want to wrap up with the series. Right now, there's 10 chapters available. People can watch it for free. You can go to my website, cultofthemedics.com, and it's all there. You can also get it on my Substack.
Link in description below, all the links.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, that's it. And what it is it's a look into a lot more than just the medical issues in the medical world. It kind of brings a lot of threads together to try to look at it, like you said, from the bigger picture. And it's just me just asking questions, really. That's really what this series is. It's just, what's going on with this? Do ancient cults exist? Do they have any effect in our society today? Are there, what happens if we find out that people that are in positions of power, authority, and trust, what happens if they are members of some of these ancient occult orders? And what does that do? Is there allegiance to the country that they're supposed to be representing? Is there allegiance to the medical establishment or institutions that they're on the surface allegedly allied with? Or are there allegiances elsewhere? At least when it comes to the top tier of a lot of these organizations and institutions. So it's just a question, and I try to leave it open-ended so that the person watching it can look at these great thinkers and researchers and whistleblowers that I present constantly throughout the series and say, are they right? Is there something we need to be looking at behind the veil of what we think is operating behind our medical systems here in the West, or have our medical systems been captured by some of these very insidious cults? And then I did an analysis of some of the more modern cults that everybody knows about, like Heaven's Gate and Order of the Solar Temple and Jim Jones, and sort of then it started getting into, well, why do so many people love cults? Like, what's up with that? Like Jim Jones, for example, would have been out of business did he not have a whole bunch of people that were raving fans of him, right? And so what is it in us that allows people, whether we're talking cults or whether we're talking political cults, like Mao Zedong and Stalin and Hitler and the modern versions of that, who are able to recruit people to their cause right before we see some of the most worst moments in human history take place? Why do we keep voting in dictators? Why do we keep supporting this evil? And so this gets into an analysis of the public mind, crowd consciousness, groupthink, the fact that we're basically involved in a fifth generation style warfare, where there are forces out there trying to change your thinking and bring you on board with what I think is an occult agenda. So yeah, there's so much in that series, and it was a lot of fun to produce. It was a lot of work, and I still have a few more to do. So stay tuned.
And I think the power of what you have to say is in your balance, because you're not an extremist in any direction, right? You ask lots of fantastic questions, but while you absolutely acknowledge that there are conspiracy theories, you also know that not everything is a conspiracy theory, and we can get lost in that, can't we? We often get lost in the reeds, don't we? We lose ourselves because everything appears to be a rabbit hole. How do you stop yourself on those occasions? It's difficult, isn't it?
It is. And thank you for asking that. Everybody likes talking about the bad news. And I always like to tell people, like, walk away from the black pills. Okay. Because here we are right now, Sonia, you and me and people listening right now who are thirsty for the truth. We want the truth. We might not always know what it is, and we do go down rabbit holes, and sometimes we're wrong because we are looking from the outside into a very complicated web of a mystery that we're all trying to solve. But you can get pulled into some areas that are going to lead you away from the truth, in my opinion. And if you start thinking that everything's evil and everybody's in on it and every single thing that happens is a conspiracy, you can go down a really dark rabbit hole. And I think that also plays in to the people who are in charge of what I think are the real valid conspiracies. So I try to personally in my work stay away from much of the fringes and stay focused on what do we have in terms of actual facts that we can look at. What's the best quality research? There's been people that have done incredible research, and I'm talking very specific, analyzed, and documented research over the years. A lot of people don't even know their names, and they have already exposed a lot of the things that we're just finding out now. And so what I felt my job was to do is to point people at the genius minds and the people who I think they were there on the ground floor and they actually had the receipts for what they were claiming. And then people can look at it for themselves and say, does it have any truth to it? But when you're online and your algorithms are all programmed to lead you down certain rabbit holes, unfortunately, we have the other side trying to sell you false information because they understand you already know, hey, we can't trust them on this. So what else can't we trust them about? And of course, we're vulnerable for those other attacks as well. So to stay on the straight and narrow, just keep your curiosity alive and stay oriented authentically towards the truth. Don't just get stuck in your own emotional biases or project your own psychology onto this research. It's a very sacred path to be able to look objectively at this and then and also be open to new information that might change a previous position that you had, which is what real journalism, real detective work, real investigation is. And I know you know all about that.
Real intelligence, right? Real intelligence is being prepared to change your opinion or your thoughts once you have been given new information that is valid. I mean, that's real intelligence as far as I'm concerned. And we don't seem to be applying it. But one of the things that you absolutely acknowledge, and I know it's right, is that our history is missing huge chunks of information because obviously history is always written by the victors, although I do think that that's changing now. And there has been this rewriting of history that goes on. But you also talk about the public square, which is of great interest to me because Elon Musk bought X, obviously, as one example, which they often, X, formerly Twitter, is often cited as the public square. How do you feel about that? Where do you feel the public square is as such?
Well, yeah, I mean, just kind of in general on public square, I use that term a lot to talk about what people are familiar with, right? And I always just think back to myself, like, how do I really know anything? Where did I get all of my information about the world, how it works, what's really going on? Well, I was raised by my parents and they started telling me some things. And then I went to Sunday school and they started telling me things. And I went to public school and they started telling me things. Then I turned on the TV, they started telling me things. And then the question is, as an individual, you have to grow up and develop your own reason, intuition, and intelligence in order to discern what if people that were telling me things weren't always accurate in what they were saying, and how do I find out what's what? And so you have to keep that curiosity alive, I think, and also be able to maintain a level of positivity in your thinking so that you don't end up getting so jaded by seeing evil, because there is real evil in the world. There are real things that we need to look at. But at the same time, there's also good things happening and there are good people doing good work out there as well. And not everybody's in on it. And so to find that balance, it takes some time. And so when I'm analyzing public square, I'm talking about, all the public religions that but do we know about the fact that there are occult religions in the world that nobody knows anything about? And maybe some of the public square concepts that we see came from those hidden ideas that aren't really known amongst the general public. Same with our political establishment. There's what people know. So like in Canada, I'm going to vote conservative or I'm going to vote liberal. Are you? What if both sides are captured? What happens now?
Right.
So it's the knowledge of the public square. And I got this from like I brought it up before, but Edward Bernays talked about the public mind. There's other, Gustave Le Bon wrote a whole book about crowd psychology and crowd consciousness, and how easily manipulated it can be. And I don't even think you need to read the book to understand this after we just went through 2020, right? We just watched that exact dynamic happen where the public square was the mainstream media narrative and what all these mainstream doctors were saying. But then there was this other side that the public was not being told about, which was all the doctors and experts that were saying something completely different. And so, I just went, well, how far does this concept go? Well, it turns out it's in everything. It's in everything. So that's why I tell people you got to learn to trust yourself. And, we do need to rely on expert opinion, for things. But what makes an expert? Is it just because someone puts a white coat on and says, I'm an expert, listen to everything I'm saying, I'm Dr. Fauci, right? Or is it based on merit? That's what a real expert would be. And what if you could become your own your own expert by putting the work in to develop that expertise so that you can leave the public square and try to see things from a bigger perspective and maybe get a little bit closer to what's really going on. And that's the goal. It's maybe not for everybody, but I'm telling you, get off the public square and get into the squares of knowledge and wisdom and seeking truth. And, if you follow your intuition and combine that with your logic, your reason, and your pattern recognition, then I think you can be a lot closer to the truth than just turning on the news and believing everything they're telling you.
We just have to be more discerning, don't we? It's absolutely ridiculous. I think we've reached that stage where we either believe nothing or we believe everything. And it all seems it's so peculiar, isn't it? It's like not, as you going back to what we've said, not everything is a conspiracy theory. And I want to get to a point where we're just a little bit more stable in our understanding. Fred has a question. I'm not familiar with any of these people that he's referring to, but you might be. I'd love to know if David has analysed Glenn Keeley and his Desdemona code. Are you familiar with any of that?
I'm not familiar, sorry, but I'll check it out.
Fred. I mean, Fred, very interesting character on the comments. Thank you, Fred. I'll check it out myself because, and that's the beauty, isn't it, about things like this, is that we can be this conduit where information is coming into us, which we can then build on. So just to talk about discernment, and that is, you are somebody that I consider has a decent supply of discernment, but it is difficult. And I think that it's too easy to call people controlled opposition as one example, just because they're saying something different to you. Do you think, one, we are able to more clearly now see who is controlled opposition? Because I personally do. And two, how do we get around this so that not everybody is demonized? How do you go about that issue of controlled opposition?
Yeah, great one. This is a tough one for people because, I'm of the opinion that there are controlled opposition. It would make sense that if you are operating some kind of criminal racket, you're going to have to get your guys into the encampment that's exposing the criminal racket, right? Or the people that are trying to find out what's going on behind the scenes. You want to put your agents in there to lead those people off the garden path and keep them out in la la land. So there's definitely that. But how do you balance that out with people just calling everybody they disagree with or have a difference of opinion of, oh, you work for the government, or you're in the CIA, or you're an Illuminati shill, or you're whatever. And then how do you also separate that from, how do we tell whether someone is pointing legitimate accusations at somebody that's committing an act of criminality or evil versus the projection of our own bigotries or our own inner shadows or whatever. So it's a murky field, but I think you just got to stick to the facts. What actual facts do you have? Or are you just repeating secondhand information that sounded smart, that maybe appealed to some kind of emotional bias? And so I think this is why this work always comes down to your own personal state of mind. Like, what is the state of your psyche? How clean is your mind as you're looking at this? Or is this just confirmation bias? Is this just infotainment? That's another good term. Are we just in this because we're entertained by, what's happening in Earth season 2025? Like, what's really going on? Give me all the gossip. Is it about that? Or are you seriously oriented towards wanting to know the facts of reality and to try to determine the truth? And so if you go back within yourself and you have to do that sort of inner work on yourself and introspection, if you do that, then I think you got a better chance of being closer to the truth, so that you're not being led by all your emotional biases or by all the people who probably are fifth columnists and infiltrators trying to lead you astray. And it's this tricky balance, but I guess everybody out there has to sort of find their own balance when it comes to how they're going to approach all this research.
I've forgotten how lovely it is to talk to you, David. An absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us live today. Really appreciate it. And I really appreciate it because not only are you dealing with it, what is literally happening on a day-to-day basis, but you are looking at the big picture. And we need to be able to do that in order to be able to understand how one is functioning with the other. Thank you so much. All your links are in the description. Great suggestion, Drum. As ever, everybody, this is the remarkable David Whitehead, and he is fabulous. Take good care of yourself, David. Lovely to have you with us.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you so much.
Take care. Wonderful. Wonderful. What an eloquent individual. I've forgotten how much I love talking to him. Absolutely brilliant. I cannot recommend his series enough, peeps. I cannot recommend it enough. Awesome dude. Drumstick. Thanks, David. Always great to hear you. Indeed. I finally managed to star something. Crazy Bunny showed me how to star comments because I'm a complete mess with these things. I do try and juggle it all together as much as I can. But Crazy Bunny showed me how to star a comment so that I don't get thrown off in the middle of what I'm saying and I can come back to it. How good is that? And this is the one because I saw that. And it was somebody called NSL saying, Sonia, I follow you when you asked Mr. Burns questions and he ran. You are talking about what's his face? Somebody tell me who is he talking about? He's talking about Baron Jacob Rothschild. That's who he's talking about. And that was cool. That was in Mayfair. And that was in Harley Street about 10 years ago. I remember that clearly with Lee, my brilliant cameraman. So yes, that's how long you've been following me, NSL. Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Yes, indeed, I do. And I've worked out how to star the comments. Woohoo, Crazy Bunny. We're there. We're getting there. Right. I want to talk about Kara's given me stars. Thank you so much. Please. Thank you. I want to talk about Kneecap. Do you know who Kneecap is? Because let me tell you something. Up until a couple of weeks ago, I had never heard of this band. Like I'd literally never heard of this band. And now they're everywhere. Why have I just knocked that off? And now they are everywhere. And they are everywhere because, no, let me bring that back to a better picture. They're everywhere because they appeared at Coachella. And as part of their set, as you can see, was the top image, which was Israel, Free Palestine. They're an Irish band, Irish trio, rap trio. And so they are now absolutely everywhere because of saying this. And things have gone just horribly. I mean, let's say Streisand effect, right? And so essentially, they are passionate about what is happening in Palestine because, as they will tell you, they saw it all with the British in Northern Ireland. This is why a lot of Irish folk are aligned with Palestine because they understand absolutely state oppression and this level of attack. They get it. And so what happened after Kneecap did this at Coachella is the attack on them has been great. Their manager, Daniel Lambert, said there's been a concerted campaign, 100% there has been, against them emanating from the US since their Coachella gig. So and what has now happened is fairly awful. Like the attacks on them is fairly awful. They've lost representation in the US, and there was even a debate in Parliament yesterday. I kid you not, because I just picked up on Hansard, Irish Republican alleged incitement. Now, let me just be clear. What's happened is because now that they have become very, very, very famous for their stance, people have gone back through their videos, their performances, and found that a couple of years ago, they said some fairly outrageous things about members of Parliament. I do not support that. I absolutely do not support any suggestions of attacking a member of Parliament. No, I do not. But that was several years ago. But the thing is, right, of course, the state would go after them. The state would go after them because the state largely is absolutely up to its eyeballs, and the representatives of the state, with money from Israel, right? So you cannot have a band doing something this big, but for them to go so far as to have a debate in Parliament yesterday really made me sick, especially when I started to see who was involved in it. This guy, don't know if you recognize him, his name's Mark Francois. He's a Conservative MP. And he's full of rage and indignation about this band. But then he would be, because he's been to Israel several times and paid for as part of the Conservative Friends of Israel in conjunction with the Israeli government. So let me just be clear about this. Let me just be absolutely clear about this. Oh, actually, let me just be clear that I've got the right person here, that I'm talking about the right person. But first of all, when we finish the show today, feel free to search Mark Francois, spelled Francois, because this is a man with a very interesting history in Parliament, some of which I daren't say because it may well be treated as defamation, because he's been convicted of nothing, but he has a very interesting history. Very interesting indeed. And so what happened was they had this debate. His urgent question was to ask the Secretary of State for the Home Department if she will make a statement on the alleged incitement to murder members of Parliament by the Irish Republican group Kneecap. And then there was all this big kind of like outrage and anger that was taking place. And Patrick Hurley, who is a Labour minister, is also full of outrage, and he wants this band Kneecap. Let me just remove this geezer, Mark Francois. Patrick Hurley wants Kneecap removed pretty much from anything, including Glastonbury. Right? This is what they do, right? Just to say again, I absolutely do not support any incitement to violence against anybody, including members of Parliament, right? And obviously what they're doing, they're using the outrage of Joe Cox and Sir David Amess and what happened with them. But let me be clear here. I would take a Kneecap 1 trillion times over the type of sellouts who took money from Pfizer and more during C19. We literally lost bands speaking up and being counted, right, through C19. But Kneecap, it does not appear to be one of them. Kneecap appeared to be a band who was prepared. They've actually apologized for that comment about the MPs, but that isn't good enough for people who want to beat these people down into the ground. That is not good enough, right? It's not okay. And as I say, Mark Francois, who was involved in leading that debate, he has an extremely controversial history in Parliament. Search him. And as I say, he's been on a number of trips to Israel, funded by Conservative Friends of Israel. And also, if you look at his voting record, it is absolutely appalling. And because I did look at his voting record. So he did not sign the letter about suspending arms sales to Israel. He did not sign the letter about upholding the ICC arrest warrants against Israel war criminals. He voted no for a ceasefire in occupied Gaza. And he signed the letter that said Israel has a right to defend itself in occupied Gaza and the occupied West Bank. I think we can see where Mark Francois is, and all of them, right? And then it just continues, because then what happens is members of Parliament are also backed up by media hacks. And this woman, again, she's another one, absolutely pushed the C19 agenda. Awful woman. You may or may not recognize her. She's LBC host Sheila Fogarty. And Sheila Fogarty, during C19, said that if carers weren't prepared to receive the C19 jab, a mandatory jab, then they should go and get a job elsewhere. That's what this piece of filth said. She also talked about poisoning people's coffees who weren't adhering to the draconian rules of C19. Thoroughly awful woman. Another, actually, I'm not normally one who comments on anybody's appearance, but during C19 I did, because it was discovered that an awful lot of media commentators who are obese suddenly felt they knew about public health. And she is obese. She does not know about public health, but she is a propagandist. And so what happened yesterday was that she started tweeting her absolute ignorance of the band, right? So there's the parliamentary debate taking place to get rid of this Kneecap, and then the media starts, right? And she's like, help me out. Has the Kneecap fella in the tricolour balaclava ever spoken out about why he wears it? Now, I'm pretty sure she's of Irish descent, right? But as I say, she is a renowned propagandist, in my opinion. And the fact that she feels the need to take to a social media to ask for research for her huge platform is fairly deplorable. And a guy called Ocean contacted her, called in to explain about the band and the genocide in Gaza. And she was caught on hot mic. Hot mic is where she didn't know the microphone was on. And she is saying effing hell as this guy is explaining to her about genocide in Gaza. The chilling indifference of these legacy media parasites never ceases to amaze me. And by the way, I see in the comments, and I absolutely relate to this, is this comment about the settlers. By the way, big hoo-ha about Louis Theroux's documentary about the settlers. Well, the thing is, if you want to know why people hate Zionists, you only have to listen to them. The Louis Theroux documentary has upset Zionists all over the place, and it's actually a great piece of journalism. But it literally is Zionists in their own words, and all you have to do is literally listen to what they're saying. I say this often about people, the Tates as one example. You don't have to make up things about these people. You just listen to them in their own words. Simple stuff. Anyway, so big attack on this band. And I just find it interesting. They always go after someone, don't they? And honestly, bring back rock and roll, bring back artists who are prepared to say up yours to the establishment. And I totally support this band. I totally support this band. And this is a very difficult point for them. And I know this as a former music journalist whose speciality was hip hop. And the reason why this is a particularly difficult moment for them is this is where it's going to test their mettle. And this is what always happens with artists, right? We've seen it, right? And especially with hip hop artists the world over have absolutely sold out. And they've sold out because they could no longer maintain a more radical stance. So people like Jay-Z and Kanye, for example, I mean, these are not radical artists anymore, and a lot of hip hop now obviously is made up of strippers and pole dancers and absolutely horrendous agendas that are being pumped and pushed. But Kneecap are in a tricky situation here now, because if they continue their stance, they're going to continue getting banned and blocked from everywhere, which is horrendous. If they actually get dropped by Glastonbury, it will be fairly appalling. Somebody said to me today, and I loved it, they said it would be so wonderful if they used some of the quotes that were said in Parliament about banning them from Glastonbury as their intro. I also saw that tweeted. I'd love that. I think that would be brilliant. But yeah, they've gone after them because they are essentially challenging the status quo, and the establishment don't like that. And these artists know it. These artists have seen it. And as they said, bombs weren't raining down on us like they are in Gaza, but we understand. We understand what happens. And they do get it. They do get it. How are you all in the comments? We're close to closing, although I've still got loads to tackle here. Right, to Rainer Fulmich. His birthday is on Sunday, May the 5th. He was, of course, convicted last week after a sham imprisonment, after a sham trial. He is the German lawyer who was speaking out during C19. They accused him and convicted him of embezzlement. His birthday is, as I say, Sunday. I have already put an address in the description. Letters and cards are, as Free Rainer Fulmich says, which is the organization that supports him, letters and cards are a central pillar and of extraordinary importance in supporting Rainer. This keeps him mentally and spiritually strong. So if you are able in any way at all to send him a message, I think that would be wonderful. Martin, I agree with that comment. Gangster rap set up by the CIA to keep black people down. It was certainly promoted there was a lot of artists like NWA who were legit. They weren't CIA, and I'm absolutely certain of that. And I talk as somebody who not only went to Compton but interviewed Ice Cube in New York as well, and I spoke to Eazy-E before his death, and they were legit. They were commenting on the environment, but what happened, of course, is the authorities did see that as a way to keep black people down, no doubt about it. One fact: during lockdown, I noticed a load of 5G towers go up. Why? I think that's a question for another day, frankly. And what else do I want to say before we leave here today? Beautiful weather. But a number of people have emailed me and messaged me on social media about the greyness of the UK skies this week before the sun kicked in. Mark's on Instagram kind of summed it up for me, said, notice how grey the sky is looking now. It's like it's lost all its clarity. Awful chemtrails everywhere. If you want to know about a terrible, terrible take about that news about the dimming of the sun, thank you, Lewis Brackpool. Noted this from your tweet. I wonder if I can just bring this in. These are the kind of idiotic people that we are dealing with, right? Let me just bring in idiotic take of the week. I wonder if I've got it there. I thought I had. I'm going to read it for you if I can't find it. Yes, I'm going to read it for you. So it's from Spiked Online, and Spiked Online said, "Is dimming the sun really such a terrible idea? Geoengineering could solve climate change while we carry on using fossil fuels. No wonder Greens are so against it. It's absolutely ridiculous. The Greens have never been against squat, and I know that because I doorstep Caroline Lewis, who was the head of the Greens at the time, outside Parliament, and asked her about geoengineering 10 years ago, something that she absolutely knew about, and she refused to discuss it with me. The Greens may talk about oh, there's a problem with the dimming of the sun, but that's after the event. It's all been happening long time, peeps, long time. But I also loved this, and this was from Frank Dexter, who said, "Dear Sonia, I hope you enjoy your day off." Oh, this must have been a couple of days ago. "I just wanted to bring to your attention." No, this is something else altogether. I'm going to refer to this on Friday. Sorry, John. I'm getting confused here. This is an image. Got it. I'm confusing myself now. I just want to bring this in because I think this is beautiful. And I think that we should celebrate our beautiful, beautiful world. And Dexter sent in this beautiful, beautiful picture. And we're all seeing so much beauty now around us. And unfortunately, they're always constantly attacking our world, aren't they? But check this out. Dexter sent this in. Frank Dexter, thank you so much. Beautiful. Said they can spray all they like, but it's not going to stop me enjoying the real beauty of this place. Indeed, indeed. Well done. Love that spirit. I really do. Got lots of stuff that I want to talk about on Friday to do with geoengineering, including this email that I started to read from John Young, and it's about project to suck carbon out of the sea begins in the UK. So at the same time as they're telling us they're dimming the sun, they've also started a project to suck carbon out of the sea. You can't make this stuff up, right? You can't. It's beautiful. I love it. Absolutely love seeing a good flower picture. Yes, I do indeed. Right, beautiful people. Thank you as ever to our donators, to Mike, to Dinesh Narui, to Merv, to C. Sengupta, to Peter Birch, and thank you to the viewers who pointed out that the Lawrence Fox clip I played on Monday was not a self-penned song by him, but actually belonged to Leonard Cohen. I didn't realize that. Thank you for pointing that out. Well, that would explain why it was so dirgy, frankly, wouldn't it? And also thank you to Dougal, who said, "Thank you, Sonia. I watch far too much crap on the internet, so trying to limit it to stuff I perceive as good stuff. I don't always agree with everything you say, but shouldn't that be the way?" Yes, it blooming well should. I would think that you were some kind of psycho stalker if you agreed with everything I say, because clearly some things I say are controversial and not opinions that everybody has, and we should be able to disagree. So I completely agree with you. Dougal said, "Love how with all the subjects you cover, you always try to end on a positive note. That does uplift me, and I'm sure many others who watch feel the same. I will write you a song." I know I've said that in the past, but it doesn't work that way. They come when the timing is right. Absolutely. I understand creativity. And thank you. Big hugs, Lugs. Big hugs to you as well, Dougal. And yeah, absolutely. We have to be able to disagree around here, right? We have to. Thank you, you beautiful, beautiful people. Right. And hello to Sam on X. I've known Sam for a good long time. Sam and I have fought the good fight against the demonization of sick and disabled people that this government do on a rotational basis of every 10 years. And they're starting it all up again. And if I hear one more ignorant go on about how sick and disabled people have fancy cars, I am personally going to track them down. Right? No, I'm not. But you know what I'm saying, right? Because it's a lie. It's a myth. It's just ridiculous. It's demonization. We saw it all before with David Cameron and Nick Clegg when they were leading the coalition and they wanted to introduce reforms to the welfare reform bill. And so what they had to do was they savaged and attacked sick and disabled people to make the general public feel that there are many, many sick and disabled people who are unworthy. Now, of course, every system, there will be frauds. But let me tell you, it is my experience, absolutely, unquestionably, the vast majority of people who apply for sickness and disability support are absolutely legit. And in fact, it's extremely difficult to get any of those things, including PIP, right? But Sam sent me a beautiful meme. And it was, you better watch those people who bounce back from everything that was meant to destroy them. Those are God's people and they're not to be played with. I absolutely love that. Thank you so much. And on Monday, I just want to refer to this. I talked about manifesting my dreams of living in Teddington, which used to be a major media centre in southwest London. This resonated with so many of you. I've loved reading your emails. Thank you so, so much, including lovely viewer Priscilla, who wrote, "Dear Sonia, when I was 10 years old, one summer evening in my parents' country house near Rome, I told them that I wanted to go and study in London. I don't know why, but I remember it felt like a matter of life and death. I needed to go to London. Anyway, they laughed at me, of course, and I was so devastated that I ran away into the forest, bringing along a picnic basket, a few blankets, and my 6-year-old brother. It didn't end well for me that night, as you can imagine. But 15 years later, not only was I in London, but I was in London with a legit job as a Bloomberg journalist, which was the job my journalist father, son of a journalist, always wanted me to choose." And Priscilla, lovely Priscilla, turns even more philosophical, which is lovely. And she says, "So I guess that we do somehow manifest our own desires, although going a bit deeper, I believe that what we desire is something we miss." So Priscilla has inspired today's end about desire, and not least because the very beautiful planet of Venus has entered the very fiery, energetic, and passionate sign of Aries. And here's a quote from Napoleon Hill: "The starting point of all achievement is desire." Yes, indeed it is. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you to our wonderful mods. Thank you to the live chatters, wherever you are receiving us, whether you're watching us on live or catch up. Thank you. I appreciate all your support. Go get 'em, Tiger. Have a great, great Thursday. Thank you as ever. And I will see you Friday. Lots of love to you all, people. Lots of love to you all. Take care. See you Friday. Have a great Thursday.